She sat in a stone tub, silent as a statue. Around her, the walls glowed faintly with torchlight, but the liquid in the bath was darker than water, thick, warm, and red. Her hand moved slowly through it, like stirring a secret. They said it was goat's blood. They said it made her young. But no one dared speak those words aloud. This was not a fairy tale. This was history. Somewhere between truth and horror stood a queen, beloved by painters, feared by maids, and remembered not for her rule, but for the rituals that stained her skin crimson. Her name was whispered in shadows. Some called her Lady of Eternal Youth, others, the Butcher Queen. What history books wouldn't say directly. Folklore shouted loudly. She was obsessed with never growing old. Mirrors were covered in her chambers. Not because she feared beauty fading, but because she feared seeing what she really was. And in a remote part of her castle, hidden behind velvet curtains and doors locked from the inside, she bathed every week. Always at night, and always the same scent lingered. Iron and fear. The blood came from goats, or so her court physician claimed. Carefully drained, warmed, and poured into marble. But those closest to her said the rituals were more than cosmetic. She muttered words no one understood. She wore strange jewelry, stones engraved with languages no scholar could read. They tried to explain it away. It's just a medicinal soak, her advisors would say. A folk remedy from the old country. But servants spoke of screams from the lower chambers, of goats dragged into shadowy halls and never seen again, of a queen emerging with glowing skin and a colder heart. She ruled with elegance, yes. But behind every ball and banquet was a room no guest was allowed to enter. Behind every portrait was a secret no historian dared to write. And now, centuries later, archaeologists find remnants, blood-stained tiles, strange bones, cryptic writings. No one wants to confirm the truth. But some say the walls still smell like iron. Some say the bath is still there, dry but never truly empty. Because some stories don't die. They just wait in silence. The queen was not born into darkness. She was born into silk sheets, golden cradles, and lullabies sung in 5 languages. Her kingdom was one of order and beauty, where scholars debated philosophy and artists painted her likeness before she could walk. But somewhere along that path of royal perfection, something shifted, and the girl who was once celebrated for her natural beauty became haunted by the idea of losing it. It began with a story. At age 15, she overheard 2 noble women whispering behind a curtain. "Youth fades fast," one said, glancing at the girl's portrait. "Let's see how long she lasts." That single comment lodged itself in her mind like a thorn. From that day, mirrors became her enemy, and time her greatest fear. The queen, then still a princess, turned to ancient texts. Her royal tutors dismissed most old rituals as foolish, but not her. She devoured them. Old herbal manuals, forgotten alchemy notes, bangramas written in cracked leather with rust-colored ink. And one book unnamed, its author unknown, spoke of bloodbaths as a fountain of youth. It's not metaphorically, literally. It wasn't about magic. The book said goat's blood contained life warmth. If harvested at the right hour under certain stars, it could reverse aging. That book became her obsession. She had it hidden in her private library, behind a false wall. No one else was allowed near it. When her father died and she became queen, she had all the power she needed to begin. At first it was quiet. 1 or 2 goats taken from distant villages, a physician hired from a land far away, who spoke in riddles and kept to himself. A bath chamber was redesigned below the palace, far from the eyes of the court. The first ritual was small. A single bucket of blood poured into warm water. She sat in it and waited. Nothing happened. But she claimed she felt alive in a way she never had before. So the next bath used more and more, until the water was gone entirely, replaced by pure, warm blood. And soon, people noticed something strange. Her skin shimmered like porcelain. Her hair darkened, not with dye, but naturally, it seemed. Wrinkles, which had begun to form at her temples, vanished. She looked younger at 30 than she had at 25. It wasn't just belief. The court saw it. The people talked. Some called it divine. Others called it unnatural. But no one dared ask where all the goats were going. and no one saw the marks etched into the bath's rim. Strange symbols added after each ritual. Symbols that glowed faintly when the blood touched them. As her beauty deepened, so did the silence around her. What had started as whispers among nobles became hushes among servants. No one dared mention the baths, not in public, not even behind closed doors. To question the queen's rituals was to invite sudden dismissal, or worse, disappearance. The palace staff changed often. Maids who cleaned near the lower chambers were rotated out every few weeks. Guards assigned to the bath corridors were told to stand still, hear nothing, and if one spoke out, they were never seen again. The official reports always claimed reassignment, but villagers noticed the funerals that followed. The queen's personal physician, a man brought from the east, rumored to be an alchemist, managed the rituals with a cold precision. He ordered the goats, he prepared the blood, he conducted the timings, always choosing specific nights, full moons, eclipses, solstices. The animals raised in hidden farms outside the city were brought in covered wagons, always at night, always in silence. At first it was just goats, but rumors spread of other animals, deer, calves, even exotic creatures. Some claimed they heard sobbing echoing from the depths of the castle. When a stable boy disappeared, his mother begged the guards for answers. She was told he had run away. But her son's shoes were still under his bed, and his blood-stained tunic, mistakenly returned with the laundry, told a different story. The court did nothing. Nobles enjoyed their positions too much to challenge her. The royal artist painted her with the glow of a young bride, not a widow ruling a kingdom. Foreign ambassadors noted her beauty and commented on her ageless grace, never daring to ask how it was kept. Even the clergy remained silent. One bishop who publicly criticized dark rituals in high places was found dead in the cathedral gardens. His body untouched, but his lips sewn shut with silk thread. The message was clear. Loyalty was life. Curiosity was fatal. Over time, the queen grew more distant. She stopped attending church. She no longer spoke at council meetings, only listened. Her eyes, once soft and youthful, became sharper, more calculating. Servants said she spoke to mirrors late at night. Not her reflection, but someone, ... or something else. Still, the kingdom prospered. Roads were repaired, harvests were strong, taxes stayed low. People feared her, yes, but they also needed her. And in every village, every town, they told their children the same warning. Stay pure. Stay quiet, and never look toward the castle after dark. 'Cause if the queen saw you, really saw you, you might be chosen, not for a royal honor. Beauty has its price. But in this queen's kingdom, the cost was measured in blood. What began as a hidden ritual soon became a system, an organized, calculated network designed to feed one woman's hunger for youth. While the nobles toasted her flawless skin and artists captured her eternal glow, a different story was unfolding beneath the surface. A story soaked in fear, secrecy, and sacrifice. The goats no longer came from local farms. They were bred in secret estates, managed by royal guards, and watched by silence, hundreds at a time. Some grew sick from stress. Others were slaughtered too early, their blood useless. The queen demanded freshness. Life must be taken as it flows, she once said, according to a dismissed servant's letter, or it's just red water. But even goats, as many as there were, eventually became not enough. Records show a strange shift in the palace economy. Unmarked wagons rolled into the capital at night, covered in canvas. Orders were made for cages, not crates. One blacksmith later confessed he was told to create devices to restrain, not for animals but for something heavier, something that breathed differently. Then came the disappearances. Children from the outskirts, servants with no family, orphans from war-torn regions. Always the forgotten, always the voiceless. No one could prove it. But those close to the palace began to notice patterns. Every blood moon the queen would retreat for days. Her chambers would remain sealed. The stone bath, built in a hidden wing of the castle, would be scrubbed so hard the scent of iron clung to the walls for weeks, and then she would emerge. Radiant, glowing, impossibly youthful. Her voice would sound sweeter, her laughter softer, but her eyes ... colder. She dismissed her advisors one by one. Only the physician remained. and a few hand-picked servants who never spoke again. Some said she kept them quiet through threats. Others believed she used something worse. Rituals whispered through cracked stone, inked in languages older than her kingdom, but outside her walls the cost was beginning to show. Farmers reported missing livestock. Mothers wept for daughters who vanished on the way to market. Priests begged the crown for explanations, and still nothing. The palace gates remained closed. And yet the people stayed silent, because the crops were still growing, because the roads remained safe, because their queen still looked like a goddess, untouched by time. But beauty that shines too bright begins to blind. And behind the shimmer of silk and pearls, the queen's hands began to shake, not from age, but from the fear that one day the blood would stop flowing, and everything she had stolen from time would come crashing back all at once. The queen never called it magic, not publicly, but those who served closest to her knew. The baths weren't just about beauty, they were protection, they were survival, and they were part of something far older than anyone dared imagine. One day, a maid named Alira, a quiet girl, barely 17, was chosen to clean the bathing chamber. It was a mistake. She wasn't supposed to see what she saw. Inside the chamber, the walls weren't plain stone. They were carved with symbols, deep, ancient, some glowing faintly even in the dark. Not just decoration, warnings, seals, curses. In the center sat the bath. Empty now, but lined with runes etched in gold and iron. At the base of the tub, a message was scratched in an unknown script. But Alira swore the letters shifted when she looked too long, as if they were alive. She didn't speak of it, not at first, but something changed in her. She stopped eating, she muttered in her sleep, and then one night she was gone. Her bed still warm, her boots still by the door. Only one thing was missing, a single page torn from the queen's private journal. That page somehow ended up in the hands of a monk named Brother Malric, an old scholar who had once studied forgotten languages. When he translated it, his hands trembled. It wasn't a diary entry, it was a confession. The queen had not discovered the blood ritual, she had inherited it. Passed down from a distant relative, one who had ruled centuries ago and vanished mysteriously. The ritual wasn't meant for beauty alone, it was a binding, a deal made with something she never named, only referred to as the whisper beneath the mirror. Every bath, every drop of blood wasn't feeding her youth. It was feeding something else. Something that kept her untouched by age, but not for free. The ritual required more each year, more blood, more fear, more silence. And if she stopped, her youth would rot overnight, her bones would break. And whatever lived in the shadows of that bath chamber would take her place. She was trapped. Not a queen, but a vessel. Malric tried to warn the church. He sent the page to the high clergy. But the letter never arrived. Days later, his monastery burned. No bodies were ever found. The queen, meanwhile, appeared at a royal banquet days after, radiant, smiling, untouched. But those who looked closely saw something new behind her eyes. A flicker, a shadow, something watching from inside. Foreign dignitaries called her the Eternal Blossom. Paintings showed her with roses in her hair, lips red as wine and skin smooth as silk. But not every visitor left the palace with admiration in their heart. One ambassador from the north wrote in his personal travel diary, never meant for public eyes, that the queen made him feel as though he were being studied, not greeted. He described the palace as magnificent, but unnaturally cold. Fireplaces were always lit, but the halls felt empty, as if the walls had swallowed sound. There is a presence, he wrote, not of man, but of memory. Another guest, a scholar from the eastern provinces, asked to study the castle's architecture. He was granted access to all but one wing, the west wing, sealed by golden locks and crimson velvet. When he pressed, the guards grew nervous. One quietly slipped him a note. Leave, before the red moon rises. He left that night and never returned. Then there were the servants. One by one, those who worked near the queen's private quarters started to break. A cook's assistant was found wandering the forest, barefoot and bleeding. Repeating only one phrase, she spoke through the glass. A laundress threw herself from the bell tower, but not before scribbling a warning on the chapel wall in goddess blood. The mirror feeds her. Don't look in. None of these incidents were ever recorded in the royal archive. But pages torn from private letters and diaries have survived, hidden in the personal collections of exiled nobles. Together, they paint a chilling picture. The queen's reflection was no longer hers alone. Some claim she spoke to her own image, not in vanity, but in ritual. Others swore they saw her pause before mirrors, whispering words that made the glass tremble. One servant, caught spying, said the reflection moved before she did, and still, she never aged. A visiting bishop, one of the few brave enough to question her publicly, declared her a puppet of darker forces. He was found the next morning, face down in the palace garden pond, his lungs filled with blood but no water. By now, the people outside the palace sensed something was wrong. The goats were nearly gone. Stories of missing travelers spread through nearby villages. The skies over the castle darkened during full moons, and no birds ever landed on its towers. They began to whisper among themselves, not prayers, but warnings. Don't look toward the west wing. Don't follow the music if you hear it at night. Don't say her name after sunset, because the queen was no longer alone in her palace, and whatever kept her beautiful was starting to show its face. The storm didn't come all at once. It started with small rebellions, murmurs among the guards, glances exchanged between maids, priests refusing to enter the palace chapel. Whispers swelled in the villages, old women clutching rosaries tighter, mothers telling their children never to look at the palace after dark. And then someone snapped. A palace guard named Darren, young, brave, and once fiercely loyal, vanished one night. Days later, he returned, but not as a servant of the crown. He arrived in the capital square, bloodied, wild-eyed, shouting the truth. I saw the chamber. I saw the thing inside. That's not a queen. That's a prison in a crown. The crowd froze. His words were like lightning, dangerous, electrifying. The royal enforcers tried to silence him, but before they reached him, a dozen others stepped forward. Servants, former palace workers, even a dismissed bishop's apprentice. They all had stories, different details, but the same warning. She bathes in blood, and she is not alone. That night, the townspeople lit torches and marched toward the palace. Not as an angry mob, but as desperate people searching for an answer. But the palace gates didn't open. The guards did not fire. There were no warnings shouted from the towers, because no one was there. Not a single soldier stood watch. The gates were unlocked. The crowd entered cautiously, expecting resistance, but the palace was empty. Dishes left on tables, food still warm in the kitchen, candles flickering. It was as if the entire court had vanished in a single breath. But one place was sealed tight, the West Wing. They found it hidden behind layers of velvet and stone. And when they broke through the door, they discovered what they feared most. Oh, the bath chamber was real. The floor was stained deep rust red. The tub, a hollowed block of black stone, was cracked down the middle, as if something had burst from within. Symbols lined the walls, not carved, but burned in. A mirror shattered on the floor, still shimmered faintly despite the absence of light. But the queen was gone. No body, no crown, no blood trail. Only a single piece of parchment left behind, stuck to the rim of the bath with dried blood. It read, "The price is paid. The vessel is broken. Do not seek her, or it will seek you." The clergy called it blasphemy. The royal records labeled it treason. Within weeks, the palace was sealed by royal decree, declared cursed. The new rulers, distant cousins of the queen, erased her name from the archives. Statues were melted, portraits burned. Coins with her image were withdrawn and destroyed. They buried the story, not out of shame, but out of fear. Because even after she vanished, people claimed to see her, in mirrors, in dreams, in their own reflections. The palace was never reopened, not officially. For decades it stood sealed, vines crawling up its walls, windows dark and unbroken. The new royals refused to live there. No soldiers were stationed near it. The land around it was declared off limits. Maps were redrawn, roads rerouted. Even the name of the region was changed, as if erasing it from memory could erase what had happened inside. But silence does not mean peace. Time does not always bury horror. Some stories simply wait in the shadows. Local villagers began reporting strange things. Children whispered about hearing music from the palace at night. Soft, slow, the kind that echoed even when the wind was still. A hunter swore he saw torchlight through the shattered windows, though no one had entered in years. A traveler who dared step onto the palace grounds returned home a day later, barefoot and babbling, his eyes white as frost. He never spoke again. But the worst stories came from those who claimed to see her, not in the castle. In reflections. A seamstress near the capital insisted that every time she looked in her mirror, she saw a woman standing behind her, tall, regal eyes glowing faintly red. When she turned around, the room was empty. But her mirror always had a crack afterward. In the village closest to the old palace, a boy disappeared after telling his mother, "The queen called me in the mirror. She said she's cold." They found his shoes outside the palace gate. Nothing else. The church tried to intervene. One brave group of priests entered the palace with relics and candles, swearing they would cleanse the wickedness once and for all. They never returned. Only their crucifixes were found, melted, twisted, left at the foot of the black stone bath. Royal dared speak of it again, but a quiet law was passed. No mirrors in the capital could be made with silver backing. Only polished metal or water glass was allowed, because silver, they said, called to her. What happened to the queen or whatever she became remained a mystery, but some believe she had become part of the ritual itself. It's no longer a woman, no longer flesh, but a hunger, a shadow tied to every reflection touched by fear and vanity. And so, the people did what history always teaches when it's too dangerous to remember. They respected the silence. They passed down warnings instead of names. They covered their mirrors at night. When children asked about the queen who never aged, the elders simply said, "Beauty is not always a blessing. Sometimes it's a prison." And some mirrors don't show what's behind you. They show what's waiting. Centuries have passed since the queen vanished from her blood-stained throne. Her name is gone from records. Her portrait no longer hangs in any gallery. Her palace is marked only by ruins and superstition. And yet the legend remains, not in history books, but in the quiet warnings whispered from mother to child, generation after generation. They still call her the queen who never aged. Historians argue over her existence. Some claim she was real, that she ruled during a forgotten dynasty lost to political upheaval. Others say she was only a metaphor, a cautionary tale about the dangers of vanity and power. But in every version of the story, the bath returns. The goat's blood, the mirror, the whispers. The evidence is scarce, but strange relics have surfaced over the years. A ring carved with the same symbols found on the palace walls. A silver mirror cracked perfectly down the center, its back scorched with heat. And once, a letter sealed in wax, unsigned, mailed anonymously to a historian researching ancient rituals. It contained only one line written in blood-red ink. The vessel never broke, was simply passed on. Even now, stories surface. Travelers who see a young woman walking barefoot near the ruins. Hikers who hear whispers when standing near old stones. A photographer who captured an image of the abandoned palace and found a second figure in the frame, though he'd been alone. But the most haunting legacy may be what hides in the modern world. The beauty industry sells the promise of eternal youth, serums, injections, treatments, but no. In some underground corners of the world, whispers rise again of blood rituals, private clients requesting ancient treatments, of mirrors shattering during procedures. Are these simply echoes of an old myth? Or is the hunger still alive, now hiding behind bright lights, glossy ads, and clinical smiles? Some say the queen's curse was never about blood or beauty, it was about belief. She believed so deeply in the power of youth that she made herself a vessel for something that thrives on vanity, fear, and silence. And as long as people fear aging, as long as they chase the illusion of perfection, the ritual continues. So if you ever find yourself staring too long into a mirror, if you hear a whisper that isn't yours, or if your reflection moves before you do, don't speak, don't run, just look away. Because some queens never die. Just wait for the next one to take their place.